Speaking of government working, Brian, let's transition to this block about Visa and the Department of Justice suing the company over alleged monopoly practices. This is D1, a tear sheet from CNBC. You can see the headline: Justice Department accuses Visa of debit network monopoly that affects price of, quote, nearly everything. The Biden DOJ continues its streak of it's partially their streak. When it comes to Google, that was a lawsuit the Biden DOJ continued from the Trump administration. A lot of energy in the antitrust space, as we know, Ryan. But going after Visa for alleged monopoly practices, that's an escalation in a good direction.
Yeah, and if we can put D2 up on the screen, the filing is, it's about like 70, 75 pages, and it's actually quite clear. It's well written and lays out, precisely why they believe that Visa is an illegal monopoly and how they've gone about building a moat. And they have, obviously they've, like on all these good ones, they got good emails and other internal memos where the criminals lay out their criminal scheme, where they say, like, this is how we're building our moat. And it's like, building a moat is anti-competitive. The Sherman Act says you can't do that. Like, you just can't. Like that, we have decided that that markets, in order for them to remain competitive, need some government intervention to block monopolies from completely controlling them. So they go through the history here where Visa controls, I think, 60 to 70% of that debit transactions. MasterCard then has like 25. So
it's not a monopoly, Ryan.
Not a monopoly.
Everything's fine.
And that there were a couple different things that happened over the last 10, 15 years that they lay out in this civil indictment, basically, civil complaint, which is, one, it's like, wait a minute, didn't we just have like PayPal and Venmo and all of these, like, all this technology came about in the last 15 years. How the heck is it that we still have this outdated technology that is still sucking $7 billion out of the economy every year? And that, it's like, well, I don't pay when I swipe my debit card. Well, yes, you do pay, because the merchant that you are buying from pays a fee to Visa, and they pass that fee on to you. And so Visa, when all these new technologies were coming around, saying, like, these are existential threats to us. They called Apple's App Store, or Apple's like Apple Pay, that an existential threat.
Yeah.
And the way that in a competitive free market, a company would respond to those threats is by delivering a better product at a lower price. That's how that's what you're going to hear from the Milton Friedmans of the world.
Yeah.
Instead, they went out and cut deals with Apple, PayPal, all these other potential competitors, and said, look, we'll just pay you to not get in our business. So you monopolize your thing over here, charge people exorbitant fees for these types of transactions. We'll charge people exorbitant fees for these types of transactions, and we'll pay each other. Because isn't it better if we're all making lots of money that we're siphoning off of consumers rather than competing with each other to offer a better product for less cost? And the competitors were like, hey, that's fine.
Yeah.
And this also goes to like quarterly.
Which you can only get away with if you're huge.
And also, right, but also the way our system is set up, they call it quarterly capitalism, where you're every quarter, you're reporting your revenues to the market, and your compensation as an executive is tied directly to those earnings, because you're paid mostly in equity. The bulk of your pay is in equity. As your revenues go up, your share prices go up, your equity goes up, you become richer, then you switch jobs. Like, you don't care. Like, you're just trying to. So for somebody like a PayPal or another competitor, a potential competitor of Visa, you might say, you know what? It's going to take us 3 years of investment and work to get to a place where we're competitive with Visa on this particular thing. That's a lot of quarters. That's a lot of quarterly conference calls where we're losing money.
Right.
And I want to leave here within 2 years, and I would like to leave here having made $45 million as a vice president or whatever. And so they're like, and instead, Visa is offering me this amount of money right now if we don't compete against them, which will lead directly to a bonus for me. Wouldn't that be nice? Let's do that instead.
It's really aggressive from the Biden administration. I mean, Visa This is the senator from Delaware, by the way. This is his minute. If you need evidence that Joe Biden is not in charge of his own administration, just note that they're going after Visa.
Oh my God, if he found out about this.
He's going to be so pissed.
They used to call him Democrat from MBNA, which was the gigantic credit card company in Delaware.
So maybe he wants him to go after Visa.
Well, they got bought up, so they're basically Visa by now. But one thing that's interesting here, we're talking about democracy in the last block. This sort of thing, because our democracy is so corrupted and bought off, has to come from the Department of Justice or the FTC at this point. I spent a couple years back in like 2010, 11.
Yeah, speaking of you being old.
13, yes. Covering this intense fight over what are called swipe fees between basically merchants and these credit card companies. Back in like 2011 in Congress, it wasn't covered by the major press because nobody cares, because it's just a fight between two major power players. But they were employing maybe over 1,000 journalists, spending hundreds of millions of dollars, getting lobbyists, dominating. Dominating the entire congressional legislative agenda, fighting over what you would set the swipe fee cap at, or whether there would be a swipe fee cap, which rolled out of what was called the Durbin Amendment from Dodd-Frank. The Durbin Amendment actually makes an appearance in this lawsuit because the DOJ points out that the Durbin Amendment had a provision that said every debit card has to have Visa and somebody else that are able to use it, which would then allow merchants to choose, say, okay, you know what, actually, I don't want to take Visa because Visa charges these huge fees. So your card also has MasterCard. So you can use MasterCard, that's cheaper here at my store. And what Visa did to get around this new law that required these two things, they went to stores and they said, all right, we have a lot of what are called non-competitive transactions where the person only has Visa. So you can only do Visa. On those, if you cut a deal with us, we're going to make them fairly cheap. And the deal is you then have to use us for everything.
Racket.
If you don't cut a deal with us, then we're charging you a boatload of money for every one of those non-competitive transactions where they have to use Visa. So all these merchants were just totally jammed up. And they had to sign these agreements that locked them in. And DOJ is saying the agreements are illegal, and the court ought to oust all of these. I just want to read one quote from this. I've put up this third element here. So I think this is the most fun story
it's so good.
that I've ever written.
It's so good.
Go back and read this one. You will absolutely die reading it.
I want to do like a Stefan. Like, it's got everything. Saxby Chandler.
Yes, it's amazing. It's incredible.
The use of the word twit pick.
Twit pick, yes. Twit pick used to be a thing.
And cups.
Cups. It's such a fun story, but here's one of the most fun quotes from a moderate Democratic senator. He said to me, "I'm surprised at how much of our time is spent trying to divide up the spoils between various economic interests. I had no idea. I thought we'd be focused on civil liberties, on education policy, energy policy, and so on."
It's a senator?
This is a senator. He said, "The fights down here can be put in 2 or 3 categories. The big greedy bastards against the big greedy bastards, the big greedy bastards against the little greedy bastards, and some cases, even the other little greedy bastards against the other little greedy bastards." What he's saying is that Congress is like a host that has shaped itself to the parasites.
Yes.
And the parasites are the lobbyists. And so both parties are trying to figure out how much cash they can raise for their campaigns. And so they go out and they try to find things that 2 big industries will fight over. Sales tax on Amazon was like another one. And it's basically the same way the mafia goes to a store and is like, "Nice store you got here.
Yeah.
Shame if something happened to it." And they smash the windows up, and then they pay them off, and then they don't smash the windows up anymore. So what Congress would do is deliberately produce legislation that they think would be destructive to some powerful interest, like Visa, and say, "Wow, you're making a lot of money on those swipe fees. We're going to put together a bill that caps the amount that you're able to charge these merchants."
Right.
And Then they go to Visa and they say, hire all of our people, give money to all of our campaigns, and maybe we won't do this. Then they go to the other greedy bastards. They go to Target, they go to Walmart, they go to Home Depot, and they say, don't you hate Visa the way that American Express, they're really ripping you off, aren't they? We've got this bill that will stop them from ripping you off. And all you got to do is hire all of our friends and donate to all of our campaigns. And then they will drag that out for years. That fight over the Durbin Amendment is still going on today.
That senator's heart is absolutely in the right place, but it is such a naive approach to government. That is, of course, what this is. This is Vegas, baby. This is Vegas in the 70s. That is our economy.
Yeah, so you kind of have to have the DOJ do it. And luckily...
But usually the DOJ won't.
Usually they won't, right.
Because of the revolving door. It's not
too.
necessarily that they're being lobbied, it's that they want to lobby.
Yeah, do you know how much lobbying there was against Jonathan Cantor getting into the DOJ to run the antitrust policy of the Biden administration?
Reid Hoffman is openly lobbying Kamala Harris right now, not as a registered lobbyist, but just as a rich dude with a lot of power and public platforms to get rid of Lena Khan.
Yeah. The good news is, during the New Deal, they did pass this law that says you can't do this. And so the White House, at least until the Supreme Court says they can't enforce laws that weren't passed within the last 5 minutes, they can still enforce laws that are on the books.
We'll see.
If they feel like it. Good for them.
All right,
what will this do? Lower the price of everything.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.